The nation of Natlan has left no one indifferent with its exuberant nature, fauna, flora, and epic battles, but most of all with a story that has polarized the audience, and it sure has been equally hated and loved. That's quite fitting for the nation of war, right? And if in the previous video we talked about how badly the Och-kan has been understood, Natlan itself is without a doubt the nation that has been least comprehended. Which, to be fair, is not surprising since its story is told in a rather questionable way, with all the good content hidden in world quests and random dialogues, maybe more than ever before. But don't worry, because that's precisely why I created this channel, to bring you this amazing story in a much more enjoyable and understandable way, without having to spend hours and hours reading descriptions of items lost in godforsaken places. Natlan is indeed the nation of war, and as such, its entire history is based on a relentless ideological war, the brutal clash of two different worldviews. On the one hand, there is trust in others, the potential of humanity as a whole to overcome any adversity when it embraces its true essence and identity. And on the other hand, we have individual sacrifice, the refusal to rely on others to solve problems and instead assuming all responsibility alone, making, whether sacrifices are necessary in the process, society as a whole against the power of one individual. A clash that surely is nothing new. It's a universal theme, appearing again and again in many stories. We see this conflict of mindsets reflected very clear from the first trailers of the region, and to understand it in depth, as well as the truth about Natlan, first we have to go back to the ancient history of the nation of war. Xbalanque, the first Pyro-Archon of Natlan, was a hero who established the philosophy of trust on which these lands were founded. He had a pure heart and strongly believed that humanity could overcome any obstacle if they worked together and believed in each other. In a war less deterministic as Genshin Impact, in which it's even implied that everything is already scripted in the constellations, Xbalanque argued that humanity has the power to write its own fate. That's why, as a ruler of Natlan, he decided that the title of Archon would not be determined by any god or star. It would be earned by personal strength and merits. Even the sacred flame, the primal source of the nation's energy, is consistently also powered by human passions and feelings. And even when Renova showed Xbalanque the future of catastrophe and destruction Natlan would have to face, his faith that humanity could prevail remained intact. The first Archon of Natlan attacked the skies to defy the stars, and for this reason, Natlan would end up being the most unique of all the nations, one that gets things done in its own way. But at the other end of the scale, in that same era once lived the Sage of the Stolen Flame, considered the wisest of dragons. He was a survivor of the war between the dragons and the Heavenly Principles. His goal was to bring justice and to take back the authority stolen from the dragons, but his sapience let him realize the mistakes of his race, understanding how brute force was not enough to defeat gods. That's how he could begin to interact with humans, learning from them, and being impressed by their tenacity and ability to evolve and improve. It was at this point that the sage decided to have a dragon-human hybrid son named Och-kan, who was destined to bring together the best qualities of the two races and lead both into a new era in the future. However, this mixing was viewed by many with suspicion, considering it as a betrayal of the very essence of the dragons. But the wise ruler understood that together a bright future awaited them, and even taught the people to use phlogiston after withdrawing from the world and history. thus leaving the baton to future generations, teachings that survive to this day, as we see in the games. With goodwill, Xbalanque and the Wise Dragon had sown the seeds of those two schools of thought that would define Natlan: unwavering faith in humanity and the determination to make the necessary sacrifices in order to improve, to opposing views that nevertheless had to coexist and go hand in hand to achieve a bright future. But one fateful day, with the Wise Dragon already gone, the dragons who opposed this mixing and coexisting with humans imprisoned his son, the half-breed Och-kan, and mistreated him horribly. This fueled an immense hatred for the dragons in him, making Och-kan deny the blood that ran through his veins. When Xbalanque rescued the half-breed, the young Och-kan began to worship the hero blindly, believing that he was a symbol of human freedom. And when he defeated the Flame Lord, becoming the first Pyro Archon of Natlan, his admiration escalated to levels of religious devotion. So, after the death of the Archon, Och-kan could assume control of Natlan, and blinded by his idolatry towards Xbalanque and his hatred for the dragons, he could end up representing the opposite of what the Archon was promulgating. For him, no one was worthy of succeeding the first Pyro Archon, and obsessed with amassing as much power as possible, he would grasp total power for himself, beginning a dark era of tyranny and turning Natlan into something totally opposite to the coexistence that had been achieved before. Of course, a tyrant is always followed by a rebellion, and in this generation, the other end of the scale would be the Scarlet-Eyed Youth. He led an uprising, overthrew Och-kan, and restored the order and laws enacted by the first Archon. But not wanting history to repeat itself, he removed his name from history to ensure that no one would idolize him. Having inherited Xbalanque's ideology, he believed that the coming generations would find a way to overcome all adversity and continue writing the history of Natlan. His feats are remembered in legends, but his identity remains unknown. Thanks to this decision, the lineage of Pyro Archons continued as Xbalanque had imagined, until the present day. Now, with context as to how the two schools of thought emerged with Natlan's two heroes and were inherited in one form or another by each generation, we can at last fully understand the actions of the current heirs of that world, Mavuika and Capitano. Mavuika is the Archon who had to face the most serious challenge in Natlan's history. She took the throne of a demoralized nation with insufficient fighting spirit to sustain the sacred flame that kept the abyss at bay. To protect her people, she had to make the ultimate sacrifice, using her soul as fuel to the flame for half a millennium. But to boost the morale of the warriors around her and reverse the situation, she would also sacrifice her own humanity. She remained flawless and unblemished, hiding how her human spirit was in tears, just to make sure that everyone had faith, and inspired by her figure, did everything in their power to achieve their goals. But she did so deeply believing that her successors would do the same, and that humanity would prevail when she was gone. Mavuika is the first Archon who inherited both the Wise Dragon's willingness to sacrifice and the first Archon's love and full trust in humanity. Capitano is her counterpart and the antagonistic figure in the story, but in many ways is very similar to Mavuika. He was originally from Caenria and witnessed how his people succumbed to their own weakness. As the Wise Dragon, he could sacrifice his own individual spirit by merging with his platoon, leading him to have an unstable humanity that would cause Capitano to be in constant doubt and tribulation. Just like the hybrid Och-kan, he was determined to use the memories and souls of the Night Kingdom, Natlan's very history, to create an ultimate ultimate weapon to finish off the Abyss. Capitano was willing to do anything for that sake, sacrificing history, corrupting his own body and humanity, bearing all the pain of his platoon, making sacrifice after sacrifice to give a future to his people. But despite this, and unlike his predecessors, Capitano agreed to yield. In a final sacrifice by accepting the predicament of Mavuika, the ultimate representation of human potential, he manages to redeem himself and reconcile with the idea that humanity is stronger than what he had believed. He doesn't have to be the one who bears all the burden. He steps away from being a stubborn warrior who wants to fight alone and becomes part of the very history he was ready to sacrifice before, embracing the legacy of the first Och-kan. As such, Mavuika and Capitano are in fact the first generation of Natlan's heroes to move beyond this clash of opposing philosophies, both accepting that the two visions must coexist for humanity to prevail, and that's what ends up giving them a chance to stand up to a seemingly invincible opponent. Natlan is the nation of war, and its two best warriors represent its end. The advent of the moment for the wounds to heal, to return home, rest, the moment of a beautiful flower rising from the ruins. The story of Genshin Impact keeps marveling me for its depth and beauty, but surely it's not always presented in the best way, with plots that get unnecessarily convoluted and a lot of distracting elements that make many people quit the game. That's why the main purpose of this channel is sharing with you this great story, synthesizing it to its very core in the most understandable and enjoyable way possible. If you want to join me in this adventure, subscribe and share the video with the fans of this universe you think may enjoy it, so we can expand this community and bring great things to the table. Also, remember to follow me on social media. I'm starting to post drawings of Genshin too, and if you're still hungry for more, take a look at my first theory of the game, now on screen. Be nice!